Out of Syria, and the first thing to say, it looks like the situation there is going to go from worse to worse. You've got rising sectarian hatred, radical jihadists, including al-Qaeda, taking a lead role in the fight, and now staking their claim to the future in Syria. Massive war crimes, rising violence and criminality, and we could find no evidence that Bashar Assad or his army is about to break. Quite the contrary. Many people told us at the beginning of the revolution they wanted to change the government. Now, given the chaos, they don't. The United States has a choice. Arm the rebels, engage even more deeply in what is becoming a chaotic and dangerous war for this region, or broker a peace, probably with Russia, give the Syrian people an opportunity to determine their future, and at least in the first stages, Bashar Assad is likely to be part of that process. George?
Congressman Engel, is that the choice?
I think it's the choice, and I will be introducing legislation to allow the president to arm the rebels. I think it's time to do that. I think the Free Syria Army needs help. We know who they are, and I think it's time that we make that move.
I've spoken with White House officials about this, and they make two arguments against precipitously arming the rebels. They say, one, you don't want them to have shoulder-fired missiles because of the threat to commercial aircraft, and two, the argument that the opposition is getting about what it needs right now from the Gulf states.
Well, shoulder-fired weapons, I'm not talking about that, but I certainly think that there are other things that we can get to them. It's never the right time. There's always a time that could be better, but I think that we run the risk of seeing Assad hang on a long time. He's a bad player. You know, back in 1979, when his father was in power, the State Department promulgated a list of countries which aid and abet terrorism. Syria was a charter member of that list. In 2004, I wrote the Syria Accountability Act, which slapped sanctions on Syria, passed the Congress and the Senate, signed into law by President Bush. Nothing has changed in Syria. This has been a regime that governs with an iron fist. They've murdered tens of thousands of their own people. There's almost 1 million people displaced. It has the potential to disrupt other countries like Jordan all around. And I think it's time the United States take a firm stand by arming the rebels.
You agree?
Listen, the best that we can hope for now is the best of the worst outcomes. So the United States doesn't have credibility with the opposition now. So any diplomatic negotiated settlement here, the United States can't play an important role because they don't have the faith and confidence of the opposition. Clearly, Russia is playing a game here that could be helpful. I do agree we ought to engage them. Here's what I think we should do. I think we need to, right now, the Qataris, the Jordanians, the Saudis, the Turks are all putting weapon systems into Syria to aid the opposition. The Islamists have attached themselves to most of the secular units. Almost every unit now has Islamists as some of their main fighters. They're well-financed. They'll fight to the death. And opposition commanders tell us that they need them and count on them for the fight. That's a huge problem for the United States. We have all of those weapon systems, including conventional weapons, that will awash the Levant across the Middle East if we don't get this right. It's time that we take a more affirmative leadership role at this table with all of the Arab League. I would have a no-fly zone in the north, a safe zone in the north, and coordinate all of the weapon systems that are going in so that at least we have the credibility for a negotiated settlement. We don't have...
Congressman talks about credibility. Secretary Kerry going over this week to the Middle East, but will not be meeting with the opposition.
That's absolutely true. In Rome, where they were meant to be meeting, the opposition is actually boycotting because of what they say is an unacceptable U.S. and international response to the Syria. But look, there's so much that's complicated. You say the White House talks about not precipitously. Well, that's really, you know, precipitously. This has been 2 years now, and all the reasons for not intervening have actually come true because of not intervening. If you look at the front of The Economist this week, it says, Syria, death of a country. Why is that important? Beyond the tens of thousands of Syrians and all the things you've just outlined, friends of the United States around being destabilized, the massive amount of weapons that could be loose, just like happened in Libya and are now, you know, threatening West Africa with al-Qaeda popping up. And beyond that, do we want to see Syria become Somalia? Do we not remember what Somalia was and the danger Somalia was for the United States and for that whole region? And so the options, as far as I can see, is the U.S. does what you're suggesting, tries to have skin in the game, tries to have some credibility on the ground, some influence on the ground, and turns what is a war anyway into a shorter war rather than a longer war that's leading to
Seems to be
Somalia?
some consensus around the table, George.
Well, let me try and disrupt the harmony.
Please don't.
It seems
You're so nice.
We have two objectives, the humanitarian objective of economizing violence and the strategic objective of controlling the outcome. And they may be in conflict. No analogy is perfect, but go back to the Spanish Civil War that began in 1936. By the time it got in full-blown proportions, there was no happy choice. There were going to be the communists were going to control Spain, or Franco was going to control Spain. And we may be at that point in Syria. Now, you say, Congressman, we know who the rebels are. How do we know?
Well, you've gone in and...
We know the Free Army, but let me just say one other thing. There's another thing that's very important here. It's a blow to Iran if Assad falls. You know, Assad has been the best ally of Iran, of Hezbollah, a terrorist organization. And by the way, the Europeans should designate Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. But Iran would be dealt a blow. They are fighting. They have their soldiers in Syria. Hezbollah's fighting in Syria. This would be a strategic blow to Iran if Assad fell.
And I want to get to Iran right now because David Muir spent the week there as well to look at, spent some time in Tehran, around the country, and took a look at how hard the sanctions, the international sanctions, are hitting.